Turbulent week for global markets again, with analysts and investors warning that a downturn could be on the horizon. Adding to the fears, Germany, Europe's economic powerhouse, posted negative growth for the second quarter of the year and looks to be heading for recession. So, to explore the global economic outlook, is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? Let's talk to Dr. Markus Krall, finance industry expert based in Frankfurt and also author. Hey there, yeah, so many questions. It's all looking pretty gloomy at the moment with the trade wars on the horizon here, still ongoing, and President Trump at the helm, and Brexit still not decided what's going to happen. First of all, what do you think? Is there going to be some sort of global recession? We're hearing the doom and gloom headlines nearly every day in the press now. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, good morning, Kevin. I think just answering this first question, are we heading for a global recession? I think yes, we are. Very clearly, the signs are not very good. The epicenter of the problem, though, is not the United States. It's not Asia, although there are also problems coming from the trade dispute and other elements. But the epicenter of this crisis, I think, will be Europe.
Yeah. Things go in cycles. When we went through this in 2008, we went through it in the 90s. How bad do you think it could be?
Well, it depends a lot on the reaction of politics and also on the question how much the imbalances have been accrued in the past 10 to 12 years. At current trend, it looks like it could be quite a severe recession for a number of reasons. Reason one is we haven't seen one for 10 to 12 years. Number two is we have a number of imbalances that have been accrued as a result of what I would call inept monetary policies. I do think that negative interest rates, zero interest rates, and quantitative easing have created a lot of problems that are now looking to rebalance. And since we have been doing that for a long time, I'm afraid that this one could be a quite severe recession that we are heading into.
And what's that going to mean for people at home? I mean, we hear about the banks and, are they strong enough to see it through? We saw that awful crash in Britain back in the 80s. I mean, is the world better placed to respond to a recession? Are the banks OK? Are they going to hold up? I mean, where you say it's going to hit worst in Europe?
Well, the problem actually lies mainly with the banks in Europe. What we've seen here in the last 10 years is that we have accrued two big imbalances. One is that the zero interest rate policy has created an army of what I would call zombie companies that should have gone bankrupt over the course of the last 10 to 12 years, but haven't because they've received the subsidy of zero interest rates. And number two is that the flat and negative or at zero interest rate curve destroys the revenue base of commercial banking. There are no savings margins, there are no transformation margins. Credit margins have been shrinking over the course of the last years, and this is eroding the quality of the earnings of the banks, while at the same time the accrual of bad companies in their books destroys the quality of their credit book. And if these two things come together, and there is a high likelihood that these two things will start to interact and come together during the course of 2020, then we will see quite some severe developments in the European banking. And this is why I believe also that Europe is the main problem in the whole scenario right now.
And then broadening it out from Europe, we got America and we got China having their spat. China's just yesterday said it's going to react to any more tariffs. We don't quite know what it's going to do, but how's that going to play out?
Well, when you look at the trade dispute between the United States and China, there are several elements. One is I do not think that currently there is a huge impact from that on the world economy and on the business cycle. There is a potential long-term impact if protectionism takes hold and world trade starts to be hindered by all types of new obstacles, and be those tariffs or non-tariff obstacles. But I do not think that this is the main impact on the economy right now. It is a good scapegoat, though, for other elements and for other players who basically do not like to see the imbalances that they have been helping accruing themselves. But I do not think that this is the main driver. It has a negative impact, but it's not huge.
What about Brexit? As it stands at the moment, it looks like Britain may come out with no deal at the end of October. Are European banks, we'll talk about how that's going to affect Britain in a minute, but are European banks ready for that, a no deal? Or is this going to be played off to the very end and then maybe something will come out of it? Let's talk about your thoughts about Brexit before we talk about the banks. Will there be a deal?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I do not think there will be a deal because to reach a deal, the European Commission would have to reopen the negotiations, and they cannot reopen the negotiations without losing face. They have been repeating that they are not going to do that so many times that they cannot do it without losing face. And this is not so much about a rational political choice, but about the personal face losing of the acting people in the European politician scene. So I do not expect that there will be new negotiations, and therefore I do believe that a no deal, or a no deal is also a misnomer, but I do believe that it's very likely to happen.
Well,
but I rather would call it a WTO deal because the WTO.
Well, as I say, there's also a term, cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Effectively, the default rules that will take hold.
End of the day, Europe is going to be worse off if it doesn't manage to strike a deal with the UK, isn't it? So it's not going to be happy about that. Would it really, just to save face, would it really say, no, you're off?
Well, the face saving is one element. The other, I think, is that it is so to speak, an unwritten rule that Europe has decided that leaving the European Union should not be easy. So there is a strong incentive to what I would call punish Britain. And this incentive is so big that they probably are ready to take some damage. Although I do not believe that the no-deal Brexit will create a huge damage to either side. It depends a lot on how people will react to the situation once it happens. Only if one or both players will not stick to the WTO rules once a no-deal happens, then there is indeed a risk of severe damage. But as long as all parties stick to the WTO rules, which they have been signing up to, I do not think that a no-deal Brexit is a big danger, a big risk, or that it will create a huge
what about
damage.
What about if you're in Britain, though, and there's a no-deal? What's that going to mean for people in Britain?
Well, I believe that it doesn't mean a lot. There will be no huge impact on the flow of goods and capital. And I think that a lot of what we've heard about the dangers of a no-deal Brexit is just fear-mongering. Actually, what the Brexit minded people in the British politics call Project Fear. I think that is a real thing. When we think back 2.5 years before the vote has taken place, there was the same kind of fear-mongering. Actually, it was assumed that Britain would fall into a severe recession immediately if people voted to leave the European Union, and nothing of the sort happened. To the contrary. So I do not see any empirical evidence or factual evidence that points in the direction that there will be an economic crisis of any kind being triggered in Britain if a no deal happens.
OK, so everyone goes to a WTO deal in Britain. Get that. Now, waiting in the wings, of course, John Bolton has said that, well, hey, first in the queue here will be the UK to make deals with America. And I suppose after saving face, Europe won't be too far behind that, trying to make deals as well and starting again. Is that the case or not?
Actually, I do believe that they will do that. In the end, Europe is heading for recession, and they will have to do everything in their power to keep that as short as possible. And that includes opening trade opportunities, doing trade treaties with all parties involved, and avoiding any type of additional risk. Sometimes a recession can clear the heads.
Yes, you tell that to the people who lost their jobs, I think, up in the north of England right now. And would that have happened anyway? You see the car manufacturers, you see Honda pulling out, you see big Japanese companies pulling out, thousands of jobs going. Would that have happened anyway?
Well, the thing is that these types of movements of production have always been taking place, one direction or the others. There are some companies in continental Europe considering going to Britain. There are some companies doing the other way around. It depends on a huge number of factors that go into these types of decisions. And I do not believe that Brexit is a bigger one than many others are. So I wouldn't read too much into individual decisions by individual companies. It's always easy to attribute it to Brexit or to any other development, but in fact this is a multidimensional decision framework that companies apply, and monocausal hypotheses usually do not lead to the right answers.
Who'd want to be Ursula von der Leyen now taking up a new post? And we're also hearing the European Central Bank says that UK banks should speed up their Brexit preparations. As far as the UK is concerned, as far as the European banks are concerned, have they done enough, do you think?
Well, I do think that European as well as British banks have done a lot because as far as I can say from the communication I have with many banks on both sides of the channel, they have been aware of the possibility of a no-deal Brexit all along. This saga is now 2.5 years ongoing, and we haven't seen good solutions other than the default of a no-deal Brexit on the table. Everything that has been negotiated has been rejected. So banks have been observing these developments. They have not been sitting idle by, and I do not think that they are not well prepared. I think they have done their homework on both sides of the channel.
Talking about the EU policy chief, Ursula von der Leyen, she takes up a new post soon. What's going to be top of her agenda? Well, obviously to look after Europe.
Well, I think that what Ms. von der Leyen really would have to do is to restore trust, not only between Britain and the rest of Europe, but also within the EU 27 that are now left behind by Britain. I think that this trust must be restored by respecting what countries like Italy, Hungary, Poland and others are wanting, which is effectively a community that is less bureaucratic, less centralistic, and has more subsidiarity, more decision-making powers in the capitals and not in Brussels, and so on and so on. And I think that this is a change of course that she needs to go for. I have my doubts, though, that she will be able to push this through in the bureaucratic environment of Brussels, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, this populist drive right now, is that good news for your average European at home? I mean, it's okay to look at the trouble that Italy's ongoing politicians are in right now. It's easy to promise, but harder to deliver, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it's so much a question of populist policies in Italy or elsewhere. I think it's more a general perception of the people that too much centralization and too much bureaucracy has been going on. And I do not think that bureaucracy and centralization will solve the problems that these people face. I think that is a general trend that Brussels have been absorbing more and more powers over the last years under the flag of ever closer union, and that people are just tired of it. And I do not think it has anything to do with populism. I think that a new balance has to be found between the role of the nations inside the European Union and the European Union itself, and this needs to be recalibrated. And I think if that happens, if this type of reform happens, there will be much less talk of a populist insurgency, or however you want to call it, and people will refocus on work and how to get things right and things done.
Dr. Markus Krall live on the line with us. Should we run out of time? That 10, 15 minutes has flown by. We could do a whole programme with you. Hope we can come back to you again, get your thoughts again. It's been great to have you on the programme. Dr. Markus Krall there, financial expert and author on the line from Germany. Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
It's been a pleasure.